Could you share maybe an example of like, maybe some of the kind of the metrics or kind of benchmarks you look for for Series A right now?
Yeah, that's great. So the marketplace checklist, we go through all those questions with any marketplace, but those don't have specific metrics or benchmarks on them. So I encourage you to read those. But these questions around, hey, how strong are the network effects? Which side values the other side, more than the others? What are switching costs, which are really important? So I think those are all really important. We can get into any of those. But let me get into specific benchmarks since you asked about that. And that's kind of off the checklist. One is at Series A, any marketplace has got to have GMV, meaningful GMV. It's hard to pitch a marketplace at the idea phase or like, oh, we don't even have any GMV running through the platform, maybe proof of concept. That's more of a seed investment, frankly. It's hard to get a Series A done that way. Probably the lowest that you'll hear of a marketplace getting Series A funding would be at $1 million GMV. But usually it's actually a few million. And the reason is most investors, not all, and most marketplaces get funded for their Series A after they have some monetization via a take rate. So, let's give an example. Let's say you've got a $5 million annualized GMV run rate, right? That doesn't mean you're doing $5 million a month. That means you're doing like $400K a month in GMV. And then you've got a 20% take rate on that, which would be attractive. So now you've got, about out of that 400, you're doing 80 something thousand a month in net revenue on your take. And that annualizes to $1 million of annualized net revenue. Now you're a candidate for Series A, certainly. In the froth of like 2021, maybe you even raised the Series A lot before that. You were even looking at your Series B. But I think especially now, SaaS investors for a long time have had this, hey, we're looking for $1 million of ARR. And I think the marketplace equivalent, one thing I just being kind of technical here, but if you want to show your investors and potential investors that you actually get the math, I please it with a marketplace, don't call it ARR if it's not recurring, because that acronym means, annual recurring revenue. It's not annualized run rate, which some founders are like, oh, footnote, or they want to footnote. That's how I meant it. Just write run rate and, net revenue. And I think people will appreciate that. And so unlike SaaS, you don't need it to necessarily be recurring. People get it's transactional. People get that it's lumpy and it might have some more churn in there. That's all okay. And we can get into some of those churn metrics. But if you have that $1 million in net revenue, that's great. Deals get done, though, all the time with, something more than $1 million in annualized GMV, but less than $1 million in net revenue. And that all will depend on your growth rate. So let's talk about the next metric, annualized growth rate. You want the GMV and net revenue, ideally before your Series A, to have tripled in the year leading up to that. If you're not tripling, let's say you're not going from $1 million to $3 million GMV, and with your 20% take rate in that case, you would only be at $600K annual net revenue when you got to the 3. It's just really hard to see how, there's this SaaS formula that works well for marketplace net revenue too, which is the triple, double, where you go from about 1 million, let's say you're a little more, to about 3 million. And then they kind of round it up now 9 or 10 million. If you're at 1.1 to 3.3, now you're at 10. And then, from there, you can kind of double to 20, double to 40, double to 80, and you're well on your way to 100 million in revenue. That's a nice pattern that investors like to see. It's aggressive. I think in this new era of potential recession, which we're not officially in yet, the growth pressure has come down a little. But you're still, it's tough prior to Series A. You're kind of in the good, not great if you doubled your revenue but didn't triple it. Prior to Series A, if the way you got to your $1 million in net revenue was at a rate slower than doubling, at less than 100% growth, then it becomes really tough. If you're experiencing less than 100% growth and you have like less than $1 million or 2 in GMV, I'd say you're at the point that you need to pivot and really get experimental. Whatever you've got is not working for venture scale unless you can get profitable or have some family relationships or somebody that's going to fund you through that. It's not compatible typically with what venture capitalists are looking for. So that's in terms of growth rates. And then I can pause there, but there's obviously lots of other metrics you look at, like things around churn. And then you'll hear a lot of marketplace investors talk about liquidity, but actually the liquidity metric is notoriously elusive and vague to define. We could talk about, different ways of defining that. But I'd say, churn, and then how you acquire supply and demand, what's the CAC and LTV to CAC on those are all also very important questions.